In the quiet, palm-lined streets of Brentwood, Los Angeles, there's a Spanish-style estate tucked away behind an iron gate and shaded by sycamores and citrus trees. The property once belonged to Glenn Frey, founding member of the Eagles, voice of Lyin Eyes, and a man who embodied both Southern California charm and old-school rock and roll swagger. After his death in 2016, the house sat vacant for years, cloaked in ivy and silence, as if the very air inside was waiting for something or someone to return. By 2023, the property was sold off-market to a young couple from San Francisco, Ava and Derek Wexler, both in their mid-30s. Ava was a lifestyle blogger. Derek worked in finance. They dreamed of a classic LA home with history, and when their realtor whispered, "This was Glenn Frey's place," Ava felt a strange thrill, like they were stepping into something sacred. They moved in that spring. The house was elegant but lived in. Hand-painted tiles, arched doorways, a sunken living room with wooden beams and a grand piano still tuned, still standing exactly where Frey had left it. The first sign was the record player. Derek found it in a back closet in the den, an old Technics turntable, dusty but intact. He plugged it in out of curiosity. That night, as they were falling asleep upstairs, they heard the faint crackle of a vinyl record spinning. They came down to find the record player on. A scratched-up 45 of Desperado rotated slowly, though neither of them had touched it. First, they laughed it off. "Maybe the wiring's weird," Derek said. But the player continued to turn on always at night, always the same song. Ava began working from the detached guest house in the back, a cozy structure with French doors and a view of the pool. One afternoon, during a Zoom call, she felt the sudden sensation of being watched. She turned, expecting to see Derek, but the French doors were closed, the patio empty. Later that week, she noticed the scent of cigarette smoke in the room, even though neither of them smoked. The odor was warm and acrid, not like fresh smoke, but like it had been trapped in the walls for years and suddenly exhaled. Then came the music. Softly at first, like it was bleeding through the drywall guitar chords, muffled singing. Ava stepped outside and walked toward the main house, only to realize the sound wasn't coming from anywhere. It was just there, vibrating in the air like a memory trying to take form. Derek, skeptical by nature, started to worry about Ava's stories until he had his own experience. He was brushing his teeth late one night in the upstairs bathroom. The mirror had a slight fog from the shower earlier, but he could still see his reflection clearly. That's when it happened. For a brief second, less than a blink, there was someone else in the mirror. A man standing behind him, tall, with shaggy hair and a button-down shirt open at the collar. The man didn't move, didn't smile, just stood there watching. Derek spun around. No one. He didn't tell Ava for 3 days. When he finally did, she nodded and said, "I think he's still here." A former housekeeper came by one afternoon to drop off a package that had been mistakenly delivered to her address. She looked around the front entry, her eyes clouded with memory. "This house never liked being empty," she said. When Ava asked what she meant, the woman shook her head. "Mr. Frey, he played music even when no one was listening. Said the silence was dangerous here." After that, Ava kept music playing in the background all day long. But it didn't stop the cold spots, the flickering lights, or the sensation reported by both that someone was walking the halls at night. Glenn Frey's private home studio was tucked into a soundproof room off the main hallway, a place the Wexlers hadn't touched. One evening, Derek decided to clean it out, thinking they might convert it into a wine room. He opened the door, stepped in, and immediately froze. The walls, lined with foam panels, seemed to pulse with heat. The room smelled of old leather and wood polish. A reel-to-reel recorder sat dormant on a shelf. But the strangest thing was the sheet music still resting on a stand, handwritten in pencil. No title, no name, just notes, lonely, unfinished. When Derek reached to pick it up, he felt a jolt in his chest, like someone had just shouted inside his head. "Don't." He backed out of the room. They kept it locked after that. The Wexlers never tried to sell the house. They didn't invite many guests. They didn't post about it online. Slowly, they adapted to the strangeness. The music that played without warning. the doors that opened on their own. The sense that someone else was always in the room just behind them, just out of frame. Ava once wrote in her journal, "I think he's not haunting us. I think he's haunting the silence. Like he can't let go until every note has been heard." And so they let the record player play. Sometimes in the middle of the night, Lyin Eyes drifts down the hallway like a ghost still chasing the echo of applause. And in that old Spanish house, Glenn Frey, or something that remains of him, continues to live where the music never stops. The summer months came quietly. Heat rose off the Brentwood pavement like breath. The lemon tree in the courtyard began dropping fruit faster than Ava could collect it. There was something about the air that year heavier, maybe, or more aware of itself. Even the birds seemed to call out less often. At night, the house moaned softly in its bones, as if it were remembering things too big for words. Ava took to walking the property alone in the early evenings, barefoot, feeling the terracotta tiles beneath her soles. She said it helped her stay connected to the house. Derek didn't argue anymore. He'd stopped trying to explain what they were experiencing. He no longer mentioned the second shadow he'd sometimes see along the baseboards, or the voice that whispered just on the edge of waking, a gravelly tone, always masculine, never angry, just there. One Sunday, around dusk, Ava followed a peculiar chill into the hallway between the kitchen and the den. The sun was melting through the high windows in long amber streaks, lighting the floor like golden ribbon. But halfway down the corridor, the air turned cold. Not the kind of cold you get from poor insulation, but the deep, moist, gripping cold of old basements and lake bottoms. She paused. That was when she heard it again, the guitar. Not a recording this time. Not a faint echo from a device or an open app. This was live and close. A single guitar string, plucked with careful hesitation. Then another. Then a minor chord, familiar and low, like the start of a ballad trying to find its own name. She turned toward the locked studio. The sound was coming from inside. The door hadn't been opened in weeks. Derek had made sure of it, even wedged it shut with an antique bench and a rolled towel, just in case. But the melody continued, slow and searching, like someone remembering their own song one note at a time. Ava backed away slowly, her breath catching. As she turned to call Derek, she noticed something strange on the hallway wall. The framed photo they had hung of vintage Eagles concert photo Ava had printed off Etsy had shifted. It was now slightly crooked. But more than that, the glass was fogged from the inside. That same night, just past midnight, Derek woke in a sweat. His dreams had been plagued by static and blurred images, flashing lights, smoke machines, the roar of a crowd he couldn't see. He sat upright and blinked into the darkness of the master bedroom. Ava wasn't beside him. The bathroom door was ajar, but no light poured from beneath it. The house was silent, too silent. He got up and moved down the stairs, barefoot, every creak of the wood sounding louder than usual. The living room was dark, save for a faint orange glow flickering from the direction of the den. He rounded the corner and stopped cold. The studio door was open. The bench had been pushed aside. There was no wind, no explanation, and yet, the door stood just a few inches ajar, as if someone had stepped inside and forgotten to close it behind them. A sound stirred within. But it wasn't music this time. It was breathing, shallow, slow, like someone pacing in the dark, inhaling with purpose. He reached for the door. Inside the studio, the temperature dropped to something unreal. The air was syrupy and dense, making every movement feel like he was wading through water. He flipped on the light, came on for a moment and then burst out in a soft pop. The room dimmed to a pale gray under the light of the moon, which filtered through the small high-set windows. There was no one there, but the tape recorder on the shelf, that old reel-to-reel, had begun to spin. Quietly, as if someone had just pressed play. And then, beneath the quiet whir, came the softest voice Derek had ever heard. Male, wispy, tired. The voice spoke only a few words, but they pinned themselves into the silence like nails. The song's not done. Derek backed out and slammed the door shut. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. By the next morning, Ava seemed changed. She didn't speak much, didn't eat. When Derek asked if she'd been up late, she only said, I saw him, and turned away. Her hair, usually tied back neatly, hung messily around her shoulders. There was dirt under her fingernails. He followed the trail of her footprints, faint but visible in the dust of the hallway, and realized they led back to the guest house. When he entered, the French doors were wide open, the curtains fluttering like sails. And on the desk, in Ava's handwriting, was a new song lyrics, scribbled hastily on the back of a printed recipe. He read the words slowly. They weren't Ava's style, not her voice. They were older, more weathered, melancholy, but grounded in hope. You can leave this town, but it won't leave you. The songs stay alive long after they're through. I've been driving this highway all night in my mind, just to find a way back to the ones I left behind. He didn't recognize the song, but it felt like Glenn. And when he looked up, the sunlight dimmed suddenly, like a cloud had passed over the whole house. Something was stirring again. Something wasn't finished. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. By mid-August, the Wexlers were no longer sleeping in the master bedroom. It wasn't a decision they made out loud. There was no dramatic conversation, no declaration of fear. It just happened. Ava had begun taking naps on the linen couch in the den. Derek started falling asleep in the guest house while reviewing work files on his laptop. After 2 weeks of this unspoken retreat, they stopped questioning it altogether. The master bedroom felt too large, too hollow. It echoed even when no sound had been made. Something had settled into the space. Or perhaps someone. Either way, they both knew not to disturb it. During the day, the house returned to normal. The sunlight filtered through the stained glass panels by the staircase. Hummingbirds hovered at the kitchen window. Neighbors passed by with dogs and strollers and gave polite waves. But inside, the rhythm of the home had changed. It was no longer theirs alone. It was on a Friday morning that Ava found the Polaroids. She'd been reorganizing the built-in bookshelf in the den, an afternoon task she'd started and abandoned half a dozen times. There was a lower cabinet that had always been stuck, its brass latch refusing to lift. That day, it gave way suddenly, snapping open with a dusty click. Inside was a shoebox, worn at the edges, the cardboard soft with age. There were no markings, no label, just an old paperclip securing the lid. Ava hesitated, then opened it. Photos, dozens of them, all Polaroids slightly curled, yellowing with time. Most were casual shots. Musicians in a dim studio, men with long hair and cigarettes laughing over soundboards. Others were more intimate: Frey in a denim shirt, perched barefoot on the piano bench, eyes closed, fingers hovering above the keys. One showed him with his son, arm wrapped around the boy's shoulders, standing by the same lemon tree in the backyard that Ava picked from each morning. But there were also photos that made her freeze. Photos of the house, the living room, the guest house, the hallway outside the studio. Same furniture, same tiles, same window light, but with blurry figures just barely visible in the background. Shapes that didn't belong. Some of them human-sized, others vague and dark, like movement caught in low light. One Polaroid had no people at all. It was just a shot of the hallway, the studio door wide open, and something in the shadows beyond it, something hunched and waiting. Ava closed the box and didn't speak of it. But that night, she dreamed of the hallway. Over and over again. She walked it barefoot, each step echoing louder than the last. The studio door creaked open, slowly, and from inside came a voice, not Frey's this time, but a woman's. He never left. Not really. And neither will you. In the following days, the piano became active. Started subtly, a single note, struck gently, almost an accident. Then full chords. Whole lines of melody drifting from the living room when no one was inside. Derek walked in one morning to find the piano lid open, even though they never touched it. A small sheet of paper sat on the music stand, blank except for one sentence, written in blocky handwriting. "What's lost is not gone." They tried to record it. Derek placed his phone on a nearby stool and left it running overnight. In the morning, the phone had shut off entirely. The footage was corrupted. But when he played the last salvageable seconds, he heard what he swore was a crowd applauding, distant, like from a stadium far away. and then a man's voice whispering, "Thank you. Good night." That week, a power outage struck the neighborhood, just an hour-long brownout that affected a few blocks. Most people didn't notice. But for the Wexlers, the blackout became something else. With the lights off and electronics dead, the house became unnervingly alive. The walls ticked and thumped. Windows rattled even though the air was still. And most disturbingly, the studio door creaked open on its own. The sound slow and dry, like wood twisting under pressure. Derek had enough. He drove to a hotel that night and refused to return until Ava agreed to call someone, a medium, a priest, anyone who could help. But Ava stayed. Not because she wasn't scared, because she was starting to understand. There was a pattern forming, a narrative threading itself through the dreams, the music, the photographs, and the scent of cigarette smoke that lingered after every phantom performance. This wasn't just a haunting. This was a message, a story refusing to be buried. She began writing again. Not blog entries, not brand partnerships or listicles or lifestyle posts. Songs. They came to her in pieces, sometimes just a line, sometimes entire verses. She wrote them in the guest house, in the bathtub, on the backs of receipts and grocery lists. She didn't even know where the melodies came from. They felt given to her. And each night, as she drifted to sleep, the voice in the hallway whispered, "Finish the song." The autumn light in Brentwood fell softer than before, golden, but weaker, like it had lost some part of its former brilliance. The days grew shorter. The house, nestled beneath the amber-leafed sycamores, seemed to fold inward with the season. Even the lemon tree stopped bearing fruit. And inside, the silence between the walls grew heavier. Ava had stopped sharing the songs she was writing. There were too many now, scattered across notebooks, post-its, napkins. Dozens of half-written lyrics, melodies without names, lines that seemed to appear without memory of having written them. Some matched the tone of old Eagles ballads. Others sounded like confessions, strange, personal, poetic. Most were written in her handwriting, but some weren't. Derek began to feel like a guest in his own home. They barely spoke. When they did, Ava's eyes seemed far away, not haunted, exactly, but focused on something he couldn't see. Sometimes she would sit by the piano for hours, not playing, not writing, just listening. And sometimes, if he stood very still at the threshold, he could hear what she heard. A faint rhythm, a hum, a voice, always just under the breath of the room, murmuring phrases like, "Still working on it. Almost there. Don't stop." Then came the final night, though they didn't know it was final. It began like many others. The sky was clear, the pool calm, the breeze from the canyons soft and earthy. Ava lit candles around the living room. She said it helped her think. Derek stayed in the guest house, flipping through emails he couldn't focus on. Something felt close, pressing, like the house had been holding its breath for weeks, and tonight it would finally exhale. Around 11:30, the lights in the living room flickered. Not wildly, just once, as if the current had dipped for a single moment. Then the record player, the one they'd unplugged months ago, began to spin. No music played, just the sound of the needle sliding in gentle circles across smooth vinyl. A slow revolution, rhythmic and dry. Derek came in from the guest house just as Ava was walking toward it. Neither of them spoke. As they stood there staring at the untouched record spinning on its own, the studio door opened. All on its own. Ava stepped forward. "Ava," Derek said, quiet but firm. She didn't respond. Her bare feet moved across the tile with slow certainty, as though something was pulling her gently, respectfully, toward the studio. When she entered the room, the lights inside flickered, then glowed steady, brighter than they had in months. Derek followed, reluctantly, standing just inside the threshold. The room was different. Warm, not cold like before. No oppressive air. No weight pressing on their chests. The reel-to-reel recorder on the back shelf had begun to turn. But this time there was no static. No random noise. There was a song playing. A soft acoustic guitar, accompanied by piano, and then unmistakably a voice. Smooth, grainy, wounded, and wise. Glenn Frey, not a track from any known album. Not a bootleg or alternate take. This was something else. He was singing words that Ava had written weeks ago. Words she thought she had invented. You can leave this town, but it won't leave you. The songs stay alive, long after they're through. I've been driving this highway all night in my mind, just to find a way back to the ones I left behind. The two of them stood frozen in the room, the music filling every corner. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The sound was full, like the house itself was singing. Then the music ended, and in the silence that followed, a soft voice, softer than breath, whispered from the corner of the room. "It's done now." A gentle breeze passed through the studio, though the windows were shut. One of the lyric pages Ava had written fluttered to the floor. The temperature dropped briefly, just enough to raise goosebumps. Then all was still. The reel stopped spinning, and the studio light went out. The next morning, the Wexlers packed. No words were exchanged about it. They didn't list the house for sale. They didn't call a realtor. They simply gathered what they needed and left. The house didn't protest. It let them go. Months later, an archival sound engineer at a private music estate in Laurel Canyon would receive an anonymous package, no return address. Inside was a single reel of tape, labeled only with the words, "For the Road." The voice on the recording was instantly recognizable, but the song had never appeared in any catalog, studio log, or bootleg collection. It became an underground legend, a haunting, beautiful ballad that sounded as if it had been recorded at the edge of time. Ava never claimed authorship. Derek never spoke of it again. But those who had heard it swore that, for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, Glenn Frey was still alive, singing a song that no one remembered writing and everyone would remember hearing. And in the Brentwood house, now quiet and vacant once more, the piano sits untouched, waiting, just in case he ever wants to come back. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.